The floor was wrong. Daniel Reyes pressed his palm flat against the metal and felt it again. A tiny vibration, so faint that most people would never notice. But Daniel had spent 15 years teaching wilderness survival in northern Canada before joining the Galactic Freight Corps. He had learned to trust what his body told him. Even when his eyes saw nothing, he stood up and looked around the cargo bay of distant anchor station. Crates of supplies filled the space. Everything looked normal. The lights were steady. The air recyclers hummed at their usual tone. Yet something in his gut said the station was sick. A Malvari worker walked past him carrying a data tablet. Daniel stopped her. "Do you feel that vibration?" he asked. The Malvari checked her tablet. Her gray face showed no expression. Sensors indicate normal operation across all decks. Perhaps you're experiencing a biological response to the recycled atmosphere. Humans often report phantom sensations. Daniel did not argue. He had been on the station for 3 months. In that time, he had learned that the other species did not listen when humans talked about feelings or instincts. They called it primitive thinking, superstition from a violent world. He finished his cargo inspection and walked toward the central hub. The station housed 200 crew members from 12 different species. Humans numbered only 9. They worked as loaders, cleaners, and repair technicians. Jobs that required hands and muscle more than advanced education. Daniel passed a group of Trevani scientists heading toward the outer observation ring. They were tall beings with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. Their homeworld was famous across the galaxy. It was a paradise planet with perfect weather, abundant food, and no dangerous animals. The Trevani had never needed to fight or run or hide. They had simply evolved in peace and turned their minds towards science. One of the scientists noticed Daniel and gave a polite nod. His name was Firen, and he led the stellar research team studying the dying star near the station. "Good day, Daniel," Firen said. His voice was soft and musical. "Are you well?" "Fine," Daniel said. "Just finished checking the food supplies." "Excellent. We rely on your careful work." Firen meant it kindly, but Daniel heard the unspoken message. Humans were useful for simple tasks. Important work belonged to species who had evolved past survival concerns. Daniel watched them go. Firen's young assistant Nira walked at the back of the group. She glanced back at Daniel with curiosity before disappearing around the corner. In the command center, Daniel found Commander Hessen reviewing reports. The Malvari officer was efficient and fair. He treated all species equally, which was better than most stations Daniel had worked on. "Commander," Daniel said, "I noticed some vibrations on Deck 7. The sensors show nothing, but I wanted to report it." Hessen checked his screens. All systems functioning within normal parameters. The station has 17 redundant safety networks. If something were wrong, we would know. "I understand. I just wanted it on record." Hessen nodded. "Noted. Your concern reflects well on your dedication." Daniel left without pushing further. He had learned that lesson too. Aliens trusted their technology completely. Machines did not make mistakes. Machines did not feel phantom sensations. Machines told the truth. That he returned to his quarters and opened his personal storage locker. Inside sat a bag he had packed on his first day aboard. Emergency rations, water purification tablets, a knife, rope, fire-starting materials, a hand-powered flashlight, medical supplies. His roommate, a Keshan named Burrow, had laughed when he saw the bag. "You think the station will crash?" Burrow had asked. "I think anything can happen," Daniel had replied. Burrow had not understood. His species came from a world of underground cities where climate control had existed for 10,000 years. The idea of preparing for disaster seemed like mental illness to him. Daniel checked his supplies and added a few more items. Then he pulled out a paper map he had drawn by hand during his first week. It showed every corridor, every emergency hatch, every supply cache on the station. He had walked every meter himself because he did not trust digital navigation. A soft alarm chimed through the station. Daniel tensed, but the lights stayed green. Just a minor power adjustment. Commander Hessen's voice came over the speakers. "Attention, all personnel. We experienced a small energy fluctuation from the nearby star. Our systems compensated automatically. There is no cause for concern. Continue normal operations. Daniel looked at his map. The observation ring, where Firen's team worked, sat at the farthest point from the station's core. If something went wrong out there, rescue would take time. He folded the map and put it in his pocket. Then he grabbed his emergency bag and headed for the door. Burrow looked up from his reading tablet. "Where are you going with that?" "Just a walk," Daniel said. "You humans worry too much. The station has protected us for 40 years. Nothing bad will happen." Daniel paused at the door. Every instinct in his body screamed that something was coming. His ancestors had survived ice ages, famines, plagues, and predators by listening to these feelings. He would not ignore them now. "Probably right," he said. "See you later." He walked into the corridor as the lights flickered once, then twice, then went dark. Emergency red replaced the darkness 3 seconds later. Daniel grabbed the wall as the floor shifted beneath him. Gravity was failing. Alarms screamed from every direction. The station shook like a wounded animal. Daniel heard metal groaning somewhere deep below, a sound that turned his stomach cold. He pushed off the wall and floated toward the central hub. Other crew members drifted past him in confusion. A Trevani scientist tumbled through the air, arms waving, completely unable to control his movement. Daniel caught him and pushed him toward a handhold. "Grab that and stay still," Daniel ordered. The scientist obeyed without question. Fear had stolen his voice. Commander Hessen's voice crackled through damaged speakers. "All personnel, energy surge from the star. Primary systems offline, secondary systems failing." The message cut to static. Daniel pulled himself along the corridor using emergency handholds built into the walls. Most species never noticed these simple metal bars. They relied on gravity, plating, and digital guides. But Daniel had trained himself to move in zero gravity during his first month aboard, just in case that he reached the command center and found chaos. Officers floated at their stations, jabbing at screens that showed nothing but error messages. The station's artificial intelligence repeated the same phrase over and over, unable to process. Unable to process. Unable to process. Hessen floated in the center of the room, his gray face tight with confusion. The surge knocked out both power grids simultaneously, he said to no one in particular. The designer said that was impossible. Daniel pushed toward him. "Commander, where is the damage worst?" Hessen looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. "The outer ring. Complete power failure. Life support offline." Daniel's heart dropped. "Firen's team is out there. We are aware. Rescue protocols have been activated." "What protocols?" "Your rescue drones need power. Your emergency teams need working doors and elevators." Hessen opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. The truth hung in the air between them. Every rescue solution required systems that were now dead. Daniel did not wait for orders. He pushed off toward the corridor that led to the outer ring. Behind him, he heard Hessen calling his name, but he did not stop. The station had gone quiet except for the alarms. Most of the crew had retreated to their quarters or found emergency shelters. They waited for the systems to reboot. They waited for the AI to solve the problem. They waited because waiting was all they knew. Daniel did not wait. He moved. The corridor to the outer ring grew colder as he traveled. The heating systems had failed with everything else. Frost began forming on the metal walls. His breath turned to white mist. He reached a sealed bulkhead door. A red light above it blinked a warning. The section beyond had lost pressure and atmosphere. 5 people were trapped on the other side. Daniel checked the electronic lock. Dead. He tried the emergency release. Also dead. Everything on this station required power to function, but he smiled grimly and opened his bag. Inside sat a manual pry bar he had brought from Earth. Simple steel, no electronics, no power requirements. Just a lever and a fulcrum. The aliens had laughed when he brought it aboard. They asked why anyone would need such a primitive tool in an age of advanced technology. Daniel wedged the bar into the seam of the door and pushed. His muscles strained, the cold metal bit into his hands. He pushed harder, using his full body weight. The door shifted. Just a crack, but enough. He repositioned the bar and pushed again. The gap widened. Air rushed through from the pressurized corridor into the dead section beyond that. He heard voices on the other side. Weak, frightened voices. "Hold on," Daniel shouted. "I'm coming through." He squeezed through the narrow gap and immediately felt the brutal cold. The temperature had dropped far below freezing. Ice crystals floated in the air. The emergency lights cast a dim blue glow over the scene. .5 Trevani huddled together near a sealed observation window. Firen was among them. His blue skin had turned pale gray. His dark eyes were wide with terror. "Human," Firen whispered. "How did you reach us?" Daniel crossed the room and checked each of them. They were alive, but weakening. Their bodies were not built for cold. Their species had never needed to endure hardship. "I opened the door manually," Daniel said. "Manually? That door weighs 300 kilograms. I had a lever." Firen stared at him with something Daniel had never seen from a Trevani. Confusion mixed with wonder. "Our communicators are dead," Firen said. "The rescue teams cannot find us. The AI cannot locate us. We have perhaps 2 hours of breathable air before the reserve tanks empty." Daniel dropped his bag and began pulling out supplies. "Then we have work to do." Nira, the young assistant, crawled closer. Her teeth chattered as she spoke. "What can we do? The systems are gone. We have nothing." Daniel held up his knife, his rope, his fire-starting kit. "You have nothing. I brought everything I need." He looked at the dying aliens around him and made a decision. They would not die today. He would drag them back from the edge using skills that predated electricity, skills that no machine could replace, skills that came from 10,000 years of human ancestors refusing to give up. "First," he said, "we make heat." Fire had not existed on the Trevani homeworld for 6,000 years. They had eliminated it as primitive and dangerous. Now 5 Trevani watched a human create flames from nothing but friction and dry material. Their faces showed emotions they could not name because their species had never needed words for them. Daniel built a small, controlled fire in a metal container he had emptied. The smoke rose toward a ceiling vent that still had weak suction from passive airflow. Not enough to clear the room completely, but enough to keep them from choking. "This is impossible," Firen whispered. "You made heat from movement. My ancestors did this for 100,000 years before we discovered electricity," Daniel said. He positioned the group around the fire at a safe distance. The warmth spread slowly but steadily through the frozen air. Nira held her hands toward the flames. Color began returning to her pale blue skin. "Why do you know this?" "Your species has advanced technology. Because Earth never let us forget." Daniel pulled emergency blankets from his bag and wrapped them around the weakest Trevani. "Our planet tried to kill us every day. Cold winters, hot summers, predators, poison plants, diseases, earthquakes, floods. We survived by learning and remembering." Firen shook his head slowly. "We removed survival instincts from our genetic code 3,000 years ago. They seemed unnecessary. Our planet provided everything we needed. And now," Firen looked at the fire, then at Daniel. "Now I understand what we lost." Daniel checked the air recycler mounted in the wall. Dead like everything else. He pulled it open and examined the internal components. A simple hand-powered pump sat inside, a backup system that nobody remembered existed that he began pumping by hand. Fresh air from the reserve tanks flowed into the room with each push. The work was exhausting, but it would keep them alive. "How long can you do that?" Nira asked. "As long as I need to." One of the other Trevani, a male named Sorrel, pointed at Daniel's belt. "Why do you carry a blade?" "Weapons are forbidden on this station." "It is not a weapon. It is a tool." Daniel kept pumping with one hand and pulled out the knife with the other. "I can use this to cut rope, open containers, make splints, clean wounds, pry open panels, and 50 other things. Humans call it a survival knife." "Survival." Sorrel repeated the word like it was foreign. "You use this word often. It is the most important word my species knows." Firen struggled to his feet and moved closer to Daniel. His body was still weak, but his mind had begun working again. "The rescue teams will come eventually. We just need to last until they arrive." Daniel shook his head. "Maybe, but I walked through the central hub before coming here. The damage is massive. They have bigger problems than 5 scientists in the outer ring. Then what do you suggest? I suggest we save ourselves. The words hung in the cold air. The Trevani exchanged confused looks. Their entire civilization was built on cooperation, shared resources, and collective support. The idea of saving themselves without help from the larger group seemed selfish, even wrong. Daniel understood their hesitation. He had seen it before on other stations. Species that evolved in safety could not comprehend individual survival action. They waited for the system to help them because the system had always helped them. Humans were different. Humans had learned that sometimes the system failed. Sometimes nobody came. Sometimes you had to walk out of the wilderness alone with nothing but your own 2 legs and the fire in your heart. I counted 6 emergency supply caches between here and the station core during my first week aboard, Daniel said. The closest one is 4 sections away. It has food, water, medical supplies, and portable heating units. For sections away, Firen said. But the corridors between here and there have no power. No atmosphere. No gravity. Correct. That is a death sentence. Daniel stopped pumping and looked directly at Firen. Staying here is also a death sentence. The fire will burn out in 4 hours. My arm will give out before that. The reserve air tanks have maybe 2 hours left. If rescue does not come, you will freeze or suffocate. Nira's voice was small. What is your plan? We move through the dead sections. I have breathing masks in my bag. Simple cloth filters that will give us about 10 minutes of breathable air each. The distance is 800 meters. If we move fast, we can make it. Sorrel made a sound of distress. You want us to walk through vacuum? Through freezing darkness? With only cloth over our faces? Yes. That is insane. No, Daniel said calmly. That is survival. My species has done far worse to stay alive. He told them about humans who had crossed frozen oceans on foot, about sailors who had drunk their own urine to survive shipwrecks, about mountaineers who had amputated their own frostbitten limbs, about mothers who had lifted burning vehicles off their children through sheer willpower. The Trevani listened in horrified silence. They had no stories like these. Their history was peaceful and comfortable. They had never needed heroes who did impossible things because nothing on their world had ever demanded it. You see, Daniel said, humans did not survive because we were the strongest or the fastest. We survived because we refused to accept death. We always found another option, another path, another choice. Even when every logical analysis said we should give up. Firen was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. What do you need us to do? Daniel smiled for the first time since the disaster began. First, we prepare. Then we move. And nobody gets left behind. Firen had never made a choice that might kill him. No Trevani had, not for thousands of years. Their civilization had removed danger so completely that risk itself had become an abstract concept studied by historians. Now he watched Daniel prepare cloth breathing masks from torn fabric, and he understood that everything was about to change. The human survival brain, Daniel explained while he worked, divides all situations into 3 categories. Safe, uncertain, deadly. When something is safe, we relax. When something is uncertain, we prepare. When something is deadly, we act. In this situation, Nira asked, deadly if we stay, uncertain if we go. Uncertainty is better than death. Sorrel had stopped shaking. The fire and blankets had warmed him enough to speak clearly. How can you move forward when you do not know the outcome? Our species plans everything. We calculate every possibility. We do not act until success is guaranteed. Daniel tied off the last mask and handed it to him. Humans act when the cost of waiting is higher than the cost of moving. Right now, waiting means death. Moving means maybe life. The choice is simple. It is not simple to us. I know, but I will make it simple. Daniel stood and faced the group. Everyone who wants to live, follow me. Everyone who wants to stay here and hope for rescue, I will leave you supplies. No judgment. This is your choice. The word choice seemed to strike them like a physical blow. The Trevani did not make individual choices about survival. Their society made choices for them. The system protected everyone equally. Nobody needed to decide their own fate. One of the Trevani, an older female named Desta, spoke for the first time. If we follow you into the dark sections, how many of us will die? Daniel did not lie. I do not know. Maybe all of us. Maybe none. The universe does not give guarantees. Then how can you ask us to take this risk? Because risk is not the enemy. Certainty of death is the enemy. Right now, staying here is certain death. Going with me is uncertain life. My species learned long ago that uncertain life is always worth fighting for. Firen stepped forward. His long legs trembled, but his voice was steady. I will go with you. Nira moved to stand beside him. Then, slowly, Sorrel and the fourth Trevani, a quiet male named Keth, joined them. Only Desta remained seated by the dying fire. I am too old, she said. I will slow you down. Leave me the supplies and go. Daniel knelt beside her. On Earth, we have a saying. The pack does not leave its weak behind. If you cannot walk, I will carry you. Desta's dark eyes widened. Why would you do that? You barely know me. Saving me risks everyone else. Because humans protect their group. Always. Even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. He lifted her in his arms. She weighed almost nothing. Trevani bones were hollow for easier movement in their low-gravity homeworld. Hold on tight, Daniel said. We move in 60 seconds. He distributed the breathing masks and gave quick instructions. Stay close. Move fast. Do not stop for anything. If someone falls, call out and keep moving. He would come back for them. The Trevani listened with complete attention. For the first time in their lives, they were not following a system or a protocol or an AI recommendation. They were following a single human who carried nothing but primitive tools and impossible confidence. Daniel opened the manual hatch to the dead corridor. Cold air rushed out. Beyond the doorway, darkness waited. No lights, no heat, no gravity. Nothing but frozen metal and empty space. Deep breath, Daniel said. Then mask on. Then move. He stepped into the darkness first. The cold hit him like a hammer. His lungs burned even through the cloth mask. Ice crystals formed on his eyelashes within seconds. Behind him, he heard the Trevani following. Firen first, then Nira, then Sorrel and Keth. They grabbed handholds and pulled themselves forward through the weightless corridor. Desta clung to Daniel's back with surprising strength. Her breath came in short gasps against his neck. She was terrified, but she was moving. That was all that mattered. The journey through the dead section took 8 minutes. It felt like 8 hours. Daniel's muscles screamed. His joints ached. The cold tried to steal the strength from his arms with every pull forward. Twice, someone fell behind. Twice, Daniel went back for them. He would not lose anyone in this darkness. When they finally tumbled through the hatch into the next pressurized section, everyone collapsed on the floor. The air was thin and cold, but it was breathable. The emergency lights cast a weak red glow. Firen lay on his back, staring at the ceiling. His body was exhausted, but his eyes showed something new. Wonder, amazement, respect. We did it, he breathed. We actually did it. Daniel allowed himself 10 seconds of rest. Then he stood and checked on each member of the group. Everyone was alive. Frostbitten, exhausted, and shaking but alive. 2 more sections, Daniel said. Then we reached the supply cache. Can you continue? Firen pushed himself up on trembling arms. Yes, we can continue. Daniel nodded and helped him stand. Then let us keep moving. The universe waits for no one. Light appeared at the end of the second dead corridor. Weak yellow light from emergency power cells, but to the frozen group, it looked like sunrise after an endless night. Daniel pulled himself through the final hatch and immediately felt the difference. Warmth. Thin, recycled warmth that smelled of plastic and metal, but warmth nonetheless. His body wanted to collapse and rest forever. Instead, he turned back and helped each Trevani through the opening. Firen came first, his blue skin now gray with cold. Then Nira, barely conscious. Sorrel and Keth stumbled through together, holding each other upright. Finally, Desta crawled through on her hands and knees, too weak to stand. The supply cache waited exactly where Daniel remembered. A sealed cabinet built into the wall, marked with symbols that most species ignored. Emergency supplies for situations that technology was supposed to prevent. Daniel broke the seal with his knife and pulled open the doors. Inside sat everything they needed. Thermal blankets with battery-powered heating elements. Water pouches. Protein bars. Medical kits. Portable oxygen masks far better than the cloth scraps he had made, that he worked quickly, wrapping each Trevani in heated blankets, checking their vital signs, forcing them to drink small sips of water. The medical kit included treatment patches for frostbite. He applied them carefully to fingers and toes that had turned an ugly shade of purple. Will we lose the damaged tissue? Nira asked. Her voice was hoarse but alert. Maybe. Maybe not. Human medicine has techniques for saving frostbitten limbs. I will teach your doctors when we reach safety. Human medicine. She repeated the words slowly. Your species developed medicine for cold damage, because cold damage was common on your world. Exactly. Every hardship we faced created new knowledge. Our planet hurt us, and we learned from the pain. Fyron sat wrapped in his blanket, watching Daniel work. His scientific mind had begun processing everything he had witnessed over the past hours. I have studied hundreds of species across the galaxy. None of them prepare for disaster the way you do. Most species never needed to prepare. Earth was different. Tell me about Earth. Daniel paused. He rarely talked about home. Most aliens were not interested, or they listened with polite confusion to descriptions they could not understand. But something in Fyron's eyes was different now. He was genuinely trying to learn. Earth is a death world, Daniel said quietly. Not the worst in the galaxy, but close. 70% of the surface is covered in liquid that will kill you if you breathe it. The land shifts and shakes without warning. The sky throws lightning and spinning storms. Temperatures range from boiling heat to killing cold, depending on where you stand. And humans evolved there. We did not just evolve. We fought for every generation. We fought predators with teeth and claws. We fought diseases that killed millions. We fought each other when resources ran low. And through all of it, we refused to die. Nira moved closer, pulling her blanket tight. You make it sound like a war. It was a war that never ended. But it taught us something precious. It taught us that survival is not given. Survival is earned. Every single day, Desta spoke from her position on the floor. Her voice was weak but clear. The Trevani believed we had evolved beyond such struggles. We believed that comfort and safety were the natural state of advanced beings. We were wrong. Daniel nodded. Comfort is wonderful. Safety is wonderful. But they become traps if you forget how fragile they are. Technology fails. Systems collapse. When that happens, the species that survives is not the smartest or the most advanced. It is the one that remembers how to struggle. Sorrel had been listening in silence. Now he asked a question that had been forming in his mind since the disaster began. Why did you come for us? You could have reached safety alone. You risked your life for aliens who looked down on you. Daniel thought for a moment before answering. Humans have many survival instincts. The need to find water. The need to find shelter. The need to stay warm. But we have another instinct that is just as strong. The need to protect our group, our family, our tribe. We are not your family. No, but you're my crew. You're the people I share food and air and space with. That makes you my responsibility. On Earth, abandoning your group to save yourself is the greatest shame a human can carry. Fyron blinked slowly. His species did not have tears, but something moved across his face that looked like the same emotion. We misjudged your kind, Daniel. We thought humans were primitive because you remembered your past. Now I understand that remembering is your greatest strength. Daniel checked the time on his mechanical watch, another primitive tool he had brought. We have been resting for 20 minutes. We should keep moving toward the core. Can everyone walk? The Trevani rose slowly. They were still hurt, still tired, still frightened. But they were also changed. They had looked death in the face and chosen to fight. That choice had transformed them in ways they did not yet understand. We can walk, Fyron said. Lead us home, Daniel. Daniel shouldered his bag and headed toward the corridor that led to the station core. Behind him, 5 Trevani followed a human through the wounded station. None of them were the same beings they had been that morning. Survival had made them something new. Rescue found them 18 hours after the disaster began. A Malvari emergency team cut through a jammed bulkhead and stopped in confusion at what they saw. Point 5 Trevani sat in a loose circle around human. A small controlled fire burned in a metal container between them. The human was demonstrating how to create sparks using 2 pieces of metal struck together. The aliens watched with the focus of students learning a sacred art. The rescue team leader approached slowly. We thought this section was lost. Sensors showed no life signs, no power, no heat signatures. Daniel looked up and smiled. He had not slept in 20 hours. His hands were cracked and bleeding from the cold. Burns marked his arms where he had reached too close to the fire. He looked half dead, but he was alive. They all were. Your sensors do not detect body heat under thermal blankets, Daniel said. And they cannot measure fire because fire is not supposed to exist on a modern space station. Firen rose to his feet and faced the rescue team. His voice carried the formal tone used for official statements. This human saved all of our lives. I request that his actions be recorded in full detail for station records and Trevani scientific archives. Commander Hessen arrived minutes later. He moved through the corridor with careful steps, surveying the damage and the impossible scene before him. 5 Trevani who should be dead, sitting around a fire that should not exist, taught by a human who should never have reached them. Daniel Reyes, Hessen said. Report. Daniel stood slowly. His legs almost buckled, but he held himself upright through pure stubbornness. Primary and secondary systems failed simultaneously. Standard rescue protocols could not reach the outer ring. I used manual tools to open sealed doors, created heat sources from basic materials, and guided the trapped crew through unpressurized sections to reach emergency supplies. Hessen stared at him for a long moment. Manual tools. Yes, Commander. You opened blast doors with manual tools. A lever and fulcrum, Commander. Simple physics. Physics. Hessen repeated the word as if hearing it for the first time. He looked at Firen. Is this accurate? Firen stepped forward. This human did things I cannot explain using logic. He created fire from friction. He walked through frozen vacuum with only cloth over his face. He carried an injured crewmate for 800 meters while navigating by memory alone. Every action he took violated our assumptions about survival, and every action he took saved our lives. Hessen turned back to Daniel. His gray face showed something rare for a Malvari. Uncertainty. How did you know what to do? I did not know, Commander. I guessed. I improvised. I made choices based on incomplete information and hoped for the best. That is not how we operate. We calculate. We plan. We wait for certainty. I understand. But certainty is a luxury that dying people cannot afford. The rescue team transported them to the medical bay near the station core. Doctors of 6 different species examined the survivors and found injuries that would heal and frostbite that would leave scars, but no permanent damage. They called it a miracle. Daniel called it Tuesday. In the days that followed, the story spread across the station. Humans had always been seen as primitive workers, useful for physical labor, but not much else. Now the other species looked at them differently. They saw the emergency bags human crew members carried. They noticed the manual tools on human belts. They observed how humans always checked emergency exits when entering rooms. What had seemed like paranoid behavior now looked like wisdom. Firen requested a meeting with the station council. He presented a formal proposal to create a new position, survival consultant. Humans would be trained to teach basic survival skills to other species. Manual tools would be added to emergency caches throughout the station. Fire-starting materials will be stocked alongside digital equipment. The council approved unanimously. Daniel received the news in the medical bay, where doctors had ordered him to rest for 3 days. Nira delivered the message personally. You changed everything, she said. Firen is already planning a cultural exchange program. He wants humans to teach us what you taught him in that frozen corridor. Daniel leaned back in his bed. His body ached in places he did not know could ache. But he smiled. What did I teach him? That survival is a choice. That waiting for rescue is not always the answer. That sometimes the primitive option is the only option that works. Those are good lessons. They are human lessons. We are lucky you were willing to share them. Fyron arrived later that evening. He carried a small object wrapped in cloth. When he unfolded it, Daniel saw a symbol made of crystal and precious metal. Trevani writing surrounded the central design. This is the mark of understanding, Fyron explained. We give it to those who teach us something fundamental about the universe. You taught us that advancement does not mean abandoning our roots, that remembering the past is not weakness, that struggling is not failure. Daniel accepted the gift carefully. It was beautiful and clearly valuable, but what it represented meant more than its materials. Thank you, he said simply. Fyron nodded. Thank you, Daniel, for not letting us die, for refusing to give up when every calculation said you should, for being human. Daniel looked at the mark of understanding in his hands. Outside the medical bay window, the stars burned cold and eternal. The universe was vast and dangerous and completely indifferent to life. But humans had never cared what the universe thought. They had survived ice ages and mass extinctions and their own foolish mistakes. They had climbed out of the gravity well of their death world and spread across the galaxy. And when the systems failed, when the machines went dark, when the perfect calculations proved worthless, humans did what they had always done. They survived. They adapted. They refused to die. Daniel closed his eyes and slept. Tomorrow he would start teaching. Tomorrow he would show the galaxy what 10,000 years of struggle had taught his species. Today he rested. He had earned it.